would like to share a little bit with you. And one of the things, the biggest thing I like about spirituality is that it's so encompassing. There's very little that gets tossed out of it. Well, I shouldn't say there's very little. There's a lot that we prefer not being. But spirituality looks at everything, the value in everything. And we draw from Jung's The Undiscovered Self with symbols and the interpretation of dreams. And this was translated and revised by R.F.C. Hull. And he shares with us that our ideas and beliefs tend to lag behind the progress of society. This occurs because, well, we find no reason to change, no reason to adapt, and only when there becomes an apparent chasm between our antiquated thoughts and societal activities do we consider change. And I know I'm guilty of this, because the thought is, well, why do I have to change when this is working for me? And the trick is to recognize when it's no longer working for me that I have to change. But if I change with the flow, then there are certain experiences that I don't have anymore, such as those periods of confusion when we begin to ask ourselves, well, why do I have to change? Why should I do this when I'm so comfortable doing this? I believe Beth is going through her own changes at work, and it's the same thing. It's exhausting. Change can be exhausting. And the more we resist it, the more exhausting it becomes. And sometimes our personality, we haven't shaped it in a fashion that allows us to move quickly, to adapt quickly to those changes. And there's nothing wrong with that. It just means that our awareness is now turned to these things, and we can see the value with change. And I would like to say thank you for allowing me to share that with you. Well, as I said, our speaker ran into some difficulties, so you're left with me. And just to give you a little perspective here, or not perspective, but why we're here, with this particular section here. Some time ago, I believe it was Beth, but my memory's not all that great. Could have been Sharon, but somebody had given the message that I should look at the book of Enoch. And I looked at the book of Enoch. We tried that. Nobody was happy with that. In fact, I didn't even put it up. But there was a second book which we draw from, and this is from J.J. Hurtak, and it is the Book of Knowledge, the Keys of Enoch. And we've moved through the first, second, third, and fourth keys. And now we're going to begin with the fifth key. So this is some deep stuff, as you might remember. And the fifth key begins with this. The key to our astrophysical time zones is the 3-in-1 alignment of consciousness forces in the Great Pyramid, with the 12s and 1 energies of time warp pyramids centered and controlled by the many and 1 throne energies of Orion and the Pleiades. Yeah, I know that's pretty far out there. So we're going to fine-tune it a little bit. We're going to look at Astro as suggesting celestial aspects, not necessarily those spatial aspects, but celestial, as in well, otherworldly sense. And if we consider Astro as relating to these celestial aspects, then we are moving towards the divine, because the divine has that presence, that celestial presence that we are always looking for to be part of. And as we move further into the key, we will find references to the cosmos, such as Orion and the Pleiades. And we're not going to move into those. We're going to keep this more on a spiritual plane for ourselves, because there's a lot of scientific jargon in there that can be so distracting. So the key, the first verse in this key, tells us that this key is speaking directly of consciousness programming. It is telling us that consciousness programming is connected to the Great Pyramid, which is referred to in the mystical scriptures of the ancient Near East as the foundation stone. So when we're talking about the ancient Near East, many of our traditional religions they've got tendrils of their roots that kind of reach in that direction, because Judaism, which a lot has formed up from, has some ties to the ancient Hindu religion. And some of their ideas that they express, some of the terminology that they use, can easily be traced back to derivations or connections to them. And when we talk about the Near East, the early Hindu teachings, we have to remember of what we learned with the fourth key, where we introduced the biophysical and the astrophysical universe, meaning we had these two separate aspects here. The physical plane, which is the bio aspect, and then we've got what many call the spiritual plane, the astral plane. There's many different names for this other dimension, the realm of souls. We're trying to bring the two together. And we talked about light pyramids. And as part of that, we introduced the idea that the light pyramids are vessels of information, and that we may be these light pyramids, these vessels of information. So as we move into this, we're going to be exploring the programming of our consciousness. Are you with me so far? And now I'm going to ask you a question. This consciousness programming, what are your thoughts about that? And since David is right in front of me, I'll begin with him. Do you have any thoughts on this idea of consciousness programming?
Well, I don't like the word programming, I guess, because it kind of goes against my grain of being open-minded and willing to explore things and ask God, that small inner voice within, whether this is true, this is truth, is it congruent with what I believe and what God thinks, and programming kind of suggests a set path. A program kind of dictates what you do, and that kind of goes against the grain of being open-minded to me. I think that's all I got on that right now.
Okay. Okay, that's good. That's good. And Sharon, what might your thoughts be about consciousness programming?
Well, I have to concur with David. I don't that the programming that sounds a little more controlling. Not having your free thought, like he said. I agree with him there 100%. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I got to think about it some more.
You think about it then. And as you do that, I'll ask Sandy, what are your thoughts about this consciousness programming idea here?
Well, I also agree the word programming is almost a kind of a negative. However, I think that maybe what they're meaning as opposed to programming is maybe a discipline.
That's a good way of putting it.
And to discipline your consciousness perhaps would help you be more attuned to what you're trying to focus on or achieve. That's kind of all I have on it at this time. I'm not sure.
All right. And Beth, consciousness programming.
Well, my brain's not working too well, but it just makes sense. I mean, our physical bodies are machines and our brain is a computer. So yes, everything within us is programmed. I mean, cellular activity, it knows what it needs to do. We're not conscious of it. So it just makes, that blueprint. Everything is a blueprint. So it just makes sense to me that yes, our consciousness comes with a blueprint.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about this whole idea of programming, because another word for it is conditioning. And we have our habits. And our habits, they're just automatic reactions to stuff. They're programs, they're conditioning. And so we've got all these different programs that we follow through. When we meet somebody, what's the first thing we do? Typically, we hold out our hand and take theirs, and we shake their hand. We greet them. We've got this ritual of greeting. You reach out and you shake their hand. Well, that may have changed with the pandemic, but that's the way it was in the old days, We've got these rituals that we go through, and these rituals they're just a different way of saying programming. I'm assuming that we all meditate. And meditation, the manner in which we choose to meditate, that is a program that we have developed. It's a system that we use. And that's all a program is a system. There's open-ended programming and closed-ended programming. Closed-ended programming is dependent. When something goes wrong in that programming, the entire thing collapses. Open-ended programming, when something doesn't happen that's supposed to happen, it works around it. It adapts. And that's what we're looking at here, is these two different types of programming and what this can mean to us. Now, spirituality is the exploration of life. It's all about the life experience. And many of us eventually come to this desire to commune with the divine. And in order for us to do that, we have to go through these exercises. And while all these exercises are different, their outcomes are the same. Which is why we encourage each of you to find what works for you to achieve what it is that you want. And what this implies is that the divine creation, the divine that we're trying to commune with, to communicate with, to be part of, is a consciousness. And to define consciousness, I'm not going to ask this question because it's just so varied. But consciousness is more than just thoughts. It's more than just awareness. It's like an assimilation of all things. So we're not going to delve into that. What we are going to delve into a little bit is this idea of cosmic, that's it, cosmic consciousness. And many have identified this cosmic consciousness as word, logos. In fact, the early Hindus tell us that in the beginning there was the Word. The term they use is Veda, but it means word. So, in the beginning there was the Word. Does this sound familiar to anybody? Yes. The Gospel of John opens with, in the beginning, there was the Word. Unfortunately, it also opens with a division because it says, in the beginning there was the Word, and the Word was with God. So now we have a division here. We have a type of duality. And there's nothing wrong with duality because it's a consciousness program. It's a condition that we accept. Good, bad. We accept that. It's easy for us. However, non-duality, or this unity, as the Vedas put the word, is non-dualism. And this is also a Hindu teaching. All of the Eastern philosophies, their root is that Hindu thought, that Hindu religion. So dualism represents a first division. And what dualism brings to us is two independent principles: male, female, active, passive, active or receptive. We've got these This is what dualism does for us. It allows us to examine. And then it moves into this religious doctrine of balance, which many of us have heard and many of us adhere to. But before we can understand unity, we have to examine this dualism. We have to examine these two aspects, because through examination, we begin to understand. We have to understand the purpose of this division here. Do you understand what I'm saying here? I mean, I've got a note to myself about the three aspects of belief, and that was what was suggested here, is the division, the independent principles, and then the religion that formed around those principles. You understand where I'm at with that? I see everybody taking notes. Did I say something profound? How about you, Beth?
Like I said, my brain's not working today, so things are just going in and out. They're not really settling.
Okay.
So
And Sandy, have I lost you?
Not completely, but I I'm trying to write these things down, but I guess I don't have a clear um a, a clear answer to what you're asking. I need more I need more input.
Well, this is what we've got going on. We've got the unity. Okay.
Right.
But in order to understand this unity, we break it apart. And as we break it apart, we have these two principal powers. We typically call them the male power and female power, or male energy and female energy. That's typically what we have here. And this is good, because this allows us to examine these two aspects of this whole. This is what the scientific process does. They break things down to investigate, to examine. And many people stop right here with these two principal powers, and they form their beliefs on these two principal powers. This is that consciousness programming that he's talking about, or conditioning, or influence, however you choose to put it. But that's what is being demonstrated here. Before we can comprehend this unity, we have to break it apart, and we have to examine it. So, does this make sense to you, David?
A little bit. It's easier to understand male and female once they're separated. The characteristics and the attributes of the male part of the inner self and the female part of the inner self, and you know, and then to understand how as one they work together, one complementing the other.
Very good. That's the direction we're going to be moving into. But I think that's in the next talk. So you're ahead of the game. All right. So does that make sense for you, Sharon?
Yes, more than it did before.
Okay, good, good, because it's going to get even messier. So there are different ways of expressing this division. One of the common ways that they use is this whole idea of a point with a circumference, or a point within a circle. And you may be familiar with this. I think I used this in an earlier talk. And we can look at this as the point being God and we being emanations from that point, or we can see this as we are the point, and what emanates from us is our relationships, our influence, everything about us emanates outward. So this is where it can get tricky, because the first represents the second, meaning that source and emanation represent the two principles. You've got the male principle, which is the point, and the circumference, which is the female principle, which is acted upon. Does that make sense? Okay. So these are the two main powers of the universe. And then the second describes the third, meaning that we've got this positive and negative aspects here that represent a balance. We understand what a balance is, correct? It requires opposition, because the only way you can maintain a balance is if the two oppose each other. Now, this is consciousness programming. So programming is, the term may sound bad, but the concept behind it, the idea behind it is not. It's just how everything works together. So in order to get back to the beginning, which is the unity, these opposites that have become opposed to each other must become complementary. Meaning, once we understand their roles, then we bring them back together again to form a unity. Does that make sense? Yes?
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay, good. Now, we see this in nature as well. So this is a natural principle. Because what happens through nature? Think biology. A single cell divides itself, and then it continues to divide itself in order to create a single person. But a single person is of no use. So everything continues. That single person becomes two people. They find their opposite or complementary. And from that, a community is formed. And then from that community, in order for the species to form, that community has to, in order for that species to survive, to continue, that community has to come together again. And again, it becomes unified. Does that make sense? So if it does make sense, then all right, Beth, you've already said your brain is scrambled, so I won't pick on you. I'll start with Sharon this time. Usually I go to Sandy and and she gets caught off guard, so we'll catch Sharon off guard. So tell me what you think of this. Tell me how you put this together.
Well, I'm writing down information, and it makes sense to me. I mean, the information makes sense. Trying to relate it to me personally is where I'm having a bit of a problem. So, just because I guess I'm just not well,
The idea here is that a lot of us are taught that we've got these different aspects of ourselves.
mhm,
It always comes back to division first. We begin as being whole. When we're born, there's nothing else about us but us. And as we grow older, well, then we hear these different things. Oh, I don't like it when you act like that. I don't like it when you're this way. I like it when you're this way. So now we have these different aspects of ourselves that are being displayed. And this is this consciousness programming. So we're being programmed that there are things about us that people don't like. And we're being programmed that these things about us that people don't like, we push off to the side. So now we've got the division.
mhm. Okay,
Okay.
yeah,
And for a good portion of our lives, we spend a lot of time keeping them separate. And then something, a shift comes along, and then these two aspects of ourselves are no longer in opposition. They're no longer fighting against each other. They begin to work together slowly, not all at once, but slowly. So we begin this process of reintegrating ourselves until we become whole again. Can you see that with yourself?
Oh, yeah.
so, oh, go ahead, Beth.
I was just saying, oh, yeah.
Well, I was gonna say, so like just as an example, like the things that people don't like about you. So you try to not do those things around people. But so the question is, I guess there's a couple questions, like those things that you do that people don't like. Do you need to investigate that? Do you need to take a harder look at that and say, why don't people like that? I mean, is it a personality problem? Is it a bad attitude? I don't know what it could be anything, I guess. So once you learn that about yourself and recognize that about yourself and work to correct it if it needs correcting, or live with it, or deal with it, or smooth it, or whatever you have to do to to deal with it, I guess. And I mean, those could be opposites. It's like you're positive and you're negative. I mean, they if you want to look at them that way, those could be your opposites. It's balance. Hopefully, I I guess as human beings, the balance. That's where I'm like sort of not exactly sure about that, but anyway, I understand what you're saying to that extent anyway.
The balance is part of the process. It's not a
Okay.
bad thing.
Okay.
It's not a bad thing. It's part of the process. In order
Okay.
for us to fully understand the whole or unity, we have to understand the purpose of balance. Because eventually balance no longer works for us. And then we have to move to something else. Well, the next step is naturally is to bring the two together, because then they become complementary.
Okay.
So there's nothing wrong with balance. It's part of the process. It's part of it's part of the program. Program is a process. It's part of the process. It allows us to understand, because in order for us to understand, especially as you said, there's something about us that people don't like. We have a choice. We can examine that and see what it is that people don't like, because maybe we don't like it either. And if we discover we don't like it, well, then we can do something to alter it, change it, because you don't want to stop. If you just stop, it will creep its way back in. So you have to discover what it is. You have to learn what it is. What purpose does this serve? What need does this satisfy? And if the balance works for you, keep with it. But eventually that balance will not work for you again. And then you move into a state of confusion, which is typical. We all go through that. I went through it. And then we begin to understand that if they start to work together, everything comes out, well, I won't say comes out better, but they begin to become whole. And you see yourself in an altogether different aspect. Does that make sense for you? Cool. How about you, David? Does this make sense for you?
Yes, it's as you said, it's pretty deep, but I'm starting to understand what you mean by programming. That there's actually learned behavior
There you go.
from there's a song by the Mother's Brothers, I think, said Frank and Jesse James were a product of their environment, and I'm a product of my environment, and what I'm doing now is changing that environment, so I guess I can reprogram myself. I had a lot that needed to be reprogrammed to try and get the two parts of me together. I think it was in the Four Agreements or some book I read. It said, "What other people think of me is none of my business." that you know, people may not like certain things. They don't like me to. Some people don't like to talk about spirituality, for example, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's them, not me, and I have to learn. You know, is I think it was Sandy said what's right and what's wrong, and what I want to keep and what I need to change.
Exactly. You're on the right path. Excellent. It can get deep, and sometimes I have difficulty finding a simpler way to present things. It's just part of me now. And this is why I ask questions, because if you're not understanding, it gives me an opportunity to explain things in a framework that you might better comprehend, because that I can hear your framework. So you're on the right track. Good. And that brings me to Sandy. You've had lots of time to prepare.
Well, I have, but you might be frustrated with my question, because I can you give a more defined definition of this? A defined example of an example. I don't know, maybe a more simplistic example. Maybe there isn't one. I don't know, but I guess I understand aspects that we don't like, aspects that we do like about ourselves, but I guess I'm not, and I understand that over time, I guess we recognize those aspects and try to bring it all into the whole, but I
Okay, let's try this then.
okay.
Now, Freud has this theory of personality, and he's got three aspects that he uses with it. He's got the id, which is all impulses, and he's got the superego, which is overly critical. The superego responds to societal conditions. It's overly critical. This is what Kant tells us to be absolutely perfect. And then we've got the ego. And the ego is what moves between each of the two. So, if we don't understand something, typically we're going to be impulsive about it. So we will move towards her over there. The ego moves over there, and that's all it is. It's impulsive. It sees this overly critical part of itself, and it just dismisses it. It doesn't acknowledge it or anything. It just goes off and does whatever it wants. Now, if ego were to move all the way over to the superego, then the superego is over here, which is overcritical, and it's looking at these impulsive actions, and it's saying, you can't do that. Don't do that. No, 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 no. They won't like that. That's no, stop. It's you can do this better. Do this, go do this. You see what I'm saying? And what the ego does, the ego brings the id together, and it brings the superego together, and it says, all right, guys, let's work this out. Now, you don't have, superego, impulsiveness does not have to be perfect. It doesn't have to follow the rules exactly. It can move around the rules a little bit. And superego, or impulsivity over here, id, you shouldn't really, superego is right. You shouldn't just run off and do things. You should investigate. You should ask. You should look into them, and they begin to communicate with each other. So you're not all together over here. You're not all together over here. You start bringing the two together. It's like you are, the ego is the mediator, and it finds the compromises that the two can deal with, and it brings them closer to the center. And eventually, they begin to work together instead of against each other.
Okay.
Does that make better sense for you?
Yeah.
Good, because I got myself lost. Ah. And it's a process. We begin life like this, and then we become like this. And hopefully, by the time we reach the end of this part of it, we're back together like this. Because when we're like this, life becomes so much easier. Because you're not overly critical of others, and you're not overly critical about yourself, more importantly, and you're not continuously responding to what feels good. You recognize that both aspects are valuable, and sometimes it's good to just do things, and other times it's good to plan them out down to the detail. And it's a process. And this is what he's demonstrating for us. We've got see, when we're divided like this, we have limitations. It's this division that gives us limitations. But when we begin to bring ourselves back together, that's when we become truly powerful. So does this all make sense to you now? Good, good. So I'm going to close with this. Whether you choose to view this as the divine within its emanations, meaning the point within the circle, or the individual emanating outward, the meaning remains the same. And the application will always be in accordance to your understanding. Keep that in mind. Whatever I say means nothing if you don't understand it. So if you don't understand it, that's why you ask questions, because everything that you take in is going to only be according to your understanding. And if things don't make sense to you, it's not my job to make sure that they do. It's your job to ask me to put it differently, just like Sandy did here, to put it differently. And if I can't put it differently, well, then I need to look at myself again. So there is no representation in any of what any of you have brought forth. There's only belief, and there's one belief, which is your belief. That is the one that matters, is your belief, not mine, but yours. Because there are no wrong beliefs. Only those that are unnatural. And those unnatural beliefs are unnatural because they refuse to change. They refuse to adapt. And I'm going to say thank you for allowing me to stir things up within, make you slightly confused once more, and enjoy. Thank you for allowing me to do that.